Good evening. It's 8 o'clock. The top headlines tonight. Inflation dips slightly, just over 7%, but it's above the RBI target band for the last 6 months. Rural inflation is higher than urban inflation. Industrial production also rises slightly. The big international headline, the dollar strengthens. In fact, $1 is now equal to €1. That's at a record low, as is the rupee. This is for the first time in 20 years that $1 is equal to €1. It's official. Uddhav Thackeray will back Droupadi Murmu as presidential candidate. His support to the NDA could cause a Maha rift as Uddhav ally Sharad Pawar is leading Shiv Sena's campaign as opposition candidate. The Uddhav decision a major blow to opposition unity. The Supreme Court says create a separate bail act, adding that for lower courts and for police, the bail must be the rule, jail the exception. No fuel to no cooking gas. Sri Lanka's reality today. Storming of palaces. Why is public anger so high against politicians? NDTV reports from Sri Lanka. The heaviest monsoon in years in some states. Usually heavy rain for 2 days is now lasting up to 10 days in key states, but a major monsoon deficit in UP, Bihar, Bengal and Jharkhand. And the universe like you've never seen it before. The highest definition images from the world's largest and most powerful NASA telescope. Our lead story tonight. Well, inflation has dipped slightly in June, but it's still above 7% for the third straight month. Let's go across to Priyanshi to just look at those figures. Priyanshi.
Well, Sonia, as you said, inflation for sure has eased marginally in the month of June, but it's concerning as it's still above RBI's target band. RBI's target band of 6% for the 6th straight month, and it's above 7% for the 3rd straight month, as you can see in that graph on your screen. Now, prices are moving fast while inflation is strong above 7%. Inflation has eased from 7.04% in the month of May to 7.01% in June, but it's still above RBI's threshold for the entire year. And as the Reserve Bank of India had earlier said that inflation will remain above 6% till December, that is what we could see. So inflation could be above the threshold for the entire year. Now, an interesting point to note here is that rural inflation is what has risen while urban inflation has fallen. Rural inflation has crossed urban inflation to be at 7.09%. It has gone up marginally from 7.08%, while urban inflation has actually fallen. So we can see that the impact of inflation is more in the rural parts of our country, while urban inflation, urban areas have seen a slight relief. Now, if we talk about the worst hit categories of inflation, food and beverages inflation is at 7.6%, clothing and footwear at 9.5%, and the highest is fuel and light at 10.4%. Of course, this driven by the fuel prices, as most of our fuel is imported, and as we know, because of the war in Ukraine and the supply disruptions, the fuel prices have been going up. Now, there's also some good news for the economy today, that the industrial production has grown by 19.6% in the month of May. Industrial growth that we call IIP is up from 7.1% in April. And if we talk about the categories that have grown the most, it's transport, beverage and clothing production. These are the categories that have grown the most. So we can definitely see good news on the industrial front, but on inflation, it has eased. But Sonia, we talked to people and understood how the impact is much more than the 7% figure on the common people. Let's listen to what they said. This is what your 1,000 rupees could buy in the month of January. But cut to July and take out these products, and this is what remains. This is all you can buy with your 1,000 rupees now. Rising prices have forced people to cut out on their needs and wants. Clearly, the weight of inflation is making the shopping bag lighter. For Veena, inflation means cutting back on a healthy oil that helps her heart patient husband. The family has also stopped getting fruit for the children.
क्या होता दवाइयाँ भी जैसे घर में कोई ना कोई तबीयत खराब रहती है, हस्बैंड को जैसे हार्ट प्रॉब्लम है, तो पहले उनकी दवाइयों के लिए सोचना पड़ता, बाद में घर के लिए कि जैसे 2 चीज ला रहे हैं हम एक ही लेके आए। जैसे उनके लिए ऑयल मतलब बिल्कुल लो कैल बताया हुआ था, जैसे राइस ब्रान है या कर्डी ऑयल है, तो उसकी जगह नॉर्मल जो तेल होते हैं जैसे वैसे उनके लिए ठीक नहीं, लेकिन मजबूरी में लाना पड़ता।
A 7% annual inflation effectively translates into a much bigger hit for this joint family in Delhi. Their monthly expenses have gone up by 50% in just the last 6 months. They say they now have to choose between food and medicines.
तो ये 10,000 जैसे लगा के चलते थे नॉर्मली, तो वो 10 से 12, 13 ऐसे कब कितना हो गया 15, फिर अब ये 17 तक जाके मतलब पूरा लगता है। तो पूरे ही मतलब चीजों में और तो और मतलब जैसे दवाइयां तक नहीं खरीद पा रहा बंदा।
For Renu and Sumita, inflation is a cost on their children's education and it means saying no to their children's wants.
घर के खर्चे बहुत बढ़ रहे हैं, बच्चों की पढ़ाई नहीं हो पा रही ठीक से। पहले 5,000 रुपए में मेरा घर का राशन भर लेते थे, अब इतनी महंगाई की वजह से हमें बहुत कम करके खर्चे अपने खर्चों को मतलब अपनी जरूरतों की सामान भी हम नहीं कर पा रहे हैं।
For the low-income households, it's only getting harder to make ends meet, especially when salaries are hardly budging.
2 साल से बच्चों की इतनी कितनी तनख्वाह, 10 साल, एक बड़े को तो 10 भी नहीं मिलती, 9.5 ही मिलते हैं। क्या खाएं, क्या बच्चों को खिलाएं, बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा है। सोच सोच के भी सामान लाना पड़ता है।
At a local kirana store, the owner explains how sharp the price rise is for popular products. Inflation is making people consume less of basic essentials such as atta.
इसी प्रकार ये डिटर्जेंट पहले 55 रुपए केजी था, अभी 67 रुपए इसका दाम हो चुका है। और इसी प्रकार से ये नहाने का साबुन है, ये पहले 68 का था, अभी 140 का ये हो चुका है, इसमें 100% से ज़्यादा। और ये देसी घी है, ये पहले 500 रुपये किलो था, अभी 650 रुपये किलो ये हो चुका है। ये विम बार है, ये पहले 20 रुपये था, अभी 29 का ये हो गया। और जैसे रिफाइंड है, अभी इसका रेट भी काफ़ी बढ़ गया है, पहले ये 100 रुपीज़ होता था, अभी 180 रुपये हो चुका है। और मसाले, नमक, टाटा नमक पहले 20 रुपये था, अभी 25 रुपये इसका MRP आ चुका है। जैसे किसी का अगर 20 किलो आटा लगता है तो अभी 15 किलो यूज़ कर रहा है, तो क्वांटिटी तो कम करनी पड़ी लोगों को बजट।
For the same prices, people now get half the products as brands cut their packages shorter.
जैसे ये साबुन है, पहले रेट में ज्यादा था, लेकिन अब महंगाई की वजह से कंपनियों ने रेट सेम रखा है, लेकिन इसकी वजन कम कर दिया। इसका बिस्किट है, बिस्किट का वजन कम कर दिया, पीस कम कर दिए, रेट वही रखा है। ये सिर्फ एक क्या है, महंगाई की वजह से।
पहले इनके साइज कितने होते थे?
पहले जैसे पीस 8 आते थे, 10 आते थे, अब 4 या 5 पीस एक बिस्किट में कर दिया। वजन 50% तक कम कर दिया है साबुनों में। कॉस्मेटिक में पहले लोग इंटरेस्टेड थे कि भाई यहाँ परफ्यूम भी लेना है, हमें डीओ भी लेना है, हमें क्रीम भी लेनी है, हमें कंडीशनर भी लेना है, लेकिन आज के टाइम में ये सोचते हैं कि अपने महीने का राशन कर लो।
For families like these, the inflation burden is well beyond the official 7%. In New Delhi, with camera person Pooja Arya, Priyanshi Sharma for NDTV.
That report there and the reality of what inflation means for the average person, Priyanshi, but also, of course, the other economic news, and you refer to the Ukraine war, but it's really changing global currency, and the rupee is getting hammered, but so is the euro. So there's a big development there today.
Right, Sonia, euro has hit a US dollar parity for the first time in 20 years. Euro is now at €1 per dollar, which is a record low. Rupee, of course, is also at a record low of 79.6 rupees per dollar. And the rupee, of course, is down by close to 7% just this year. If we talk about other currencies, it's not just rupee that's hurting, but even currencies of developed countries that are going down. Pound is at 1.18 per dollar. Yen is at 0.0073 per dollar. So we can see that currencies that are considered stronger are also lowering against the dollar. As dollar is strengthening, investors are going back to it as global economic uncertainties continue. Now, if we also talk about more bad news for the economy, the markets declined for the second straight session today. Markets shed over 0.9%, and this comes ahead of important US inflation data that's going to come out this week, and it's expected to go beyond the 40-year high and touch 9%. Now, today, Sensex lost 508 points to end at 53,886, while Nifty fell by 157 points to settle at 16,058 points. All eyes on the inflation data from the United States after our own.
Right, Priyanshi, thanks so much for all those economic updates. But let's just go across to what's happening in the world of politics. And Sanket reports that Uddhav Thackeray has decided to support the NDA presidential candidate Droupadi Murmu in the presidential elections. He made that announcement today, but there are much larger implications for opposition unity as well with that announcement. Sanket?
So, how do the numbers add up as far as the president fight is concerned, the presidential race is concerned? It seems that Mr. Yashwant Sinha is not getting the sort of support that he thought that he would. And the latest is Mr. Uddhav Thackeray. Let's see what has happened. So Shiv Sena's Shinde as well as Uddhav faction are going to vote for one choice. Uddhav has decided to support the NDA's presidential candidate. Now Shiv Sena, remember, just for perspective, voted for UPA's presidential candidate in 2007, that is Pratibha Devi Singh Patil, and 2012, that is Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, despite being a part of the NDA. So it's very interesting that they have decided to this time back the NDA and not be with the UPA, their new alliance partners. Now this move is being seen as Uddhav's attempt to reach out to rebel MLAs and also contain the defection of the MPs. Remember, a meeting took place where about 12 or 13 MPs only showed up and 6 or 7 were not there. Now Uddhav is risking an NCP Congress alliance, that is the Aghadi, and perhaps risking his so-called friendship with Sharad Pawar. In fact, there is talk of great tension, or could there perhaps be tension between Sharad Pawar and Uddhav Thackeray just to get his own house in order? Is that the larger idea behind supporting Droupadi Murmu, though he says that he is backing a tribal candidate for this position? Let's quickly listen into what Uddhav Thackeray had to say and then what the opposition's candidate Yashwant Sinha had to say.
मैं द्रौपदी जी को शिवसेना की ओर से समर्थन देता हूं और आने वाले समय में जब वो राष्ट्राध्यक्ष बनेगी तो मेरी यही इच्छा और शुभेच्छा शुभकामना है कि हिंदुस्तान जो आज की स्थिति में चल रहा है उससे उभर कर आगे बढ़े।
हम तो ये उम्मीद करके चलते थे कि जो बचा हुआ धड़ा है उद्धव ठाकरे के साथ वो हमारे समर्थन में रहेगा और ऐसा उन्होंने आश्वासन भी हमको दिया।
Let's now talk about the numbers, which is very, very significant. So as far as Droupadi Murmu is concerned, BJP has 42.30% of the electoral college. You add about 2% of the JDU, 1.38 of the ADMK, 4% of YSR Congress, 2.93 of the BJD, BSP is under 1%, both the factions of the Shiv Sena, 0.63 and 1.7 together, and about 4% of the independents. This takes the tally in terms of percentage for Droupadi Murmu to 60.64%. And this is definitely 10.5% more than the halfway mark. So how do you get a new president in this country if you have more than 50% of the electoral college? As of this moment, for all those people who have pledged support, 60.5% are with Droupadi Murmu. And even now, Aam Aadmi Party is yet to decide. The Jharkhand Mukti Morcha in all likelihood is going to be with Droupadi Murmu, and there are other candidates or other political parties and formations also who are likely to vote. If this also gets added to Droupadi Murmu's total, then in that case, her electoral college percentage could rise as high as 65%. We are also hearing that many people, because this presidential election is a constitutional, is an election for a constitutional post, which means that there is no party whip involved. In that case, many people from their existing parties can also, without any action from their party, choose to vote in favor of Droupadi Murmu. For instance, women MPs and MLAs. For instance, tribal MPs and MLAs. So could there be a situation where this would be a landslide win for Droupadi Murmu? And where does that leave the opposition's choice, Mr. Yashwant Sinha?
And where does that leave the opposition, Sanket? That's also the big question. But let's just go across to Sri Lanka, where Sreeja has been reporting from, where a brother of the president, of the ex-president, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he's scheduled to resign tomorrow, was stopped at the airport and he was trying to fly out to Dubai. However, he's stopped by alert airport officials and passengers. As of now, President Rajapaksa is scheduled to resign tomorrow. But as Sreeja reports, why is it that the public anger against the politicians, the president, the Rajapaksas grew until it went out of control Here's a report on what Sri Lanka's current reality is like today.
This is the presidential palace of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, now taken over by people who are discovering the stark differences between how they have lived and how they till recently most powerful man in Sri Lanka lived. The curiosity is so much that the queue to enter the palace is longer than those waiting to buy fuel on the street.
I have never seen the luxury like this before. They are supposed to be living the best of luxury.
Yes.
People are dying on the streets in starvation. They are not the least bothered. They are only fighting for power. They have been taking commission. They have been stealing billions of money.
The other VIP home that is drawing crowds is Temple Trees, the official bungalow of Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. In the backyard now, people are busy cooking food.
வீட்டில் இருந்து நாங்கள் வந்து இப்போ 3.5 மாதம் ஆகுது 3.5 மாதம் ஆகுது இப்போ 97 நாள் ஆகுது இப்போ கொழும்புக்கு வந்து அங்கேருந்து எங்கள் புள்ளியில் சரி நாங்கள் பார்க்க போகல இந்த மக்களை நினச்சி நாங்கள் இந்த அண்டையிலேருந்து ரோட்டில் படுத்தோம் ரோட்டில் நாங்கள் கஷ்டப்பட்டோம் எங்களுக்கு போலீஸால் அடித்தான் ஆமீன் அடித்தான்.
People are shocked at the opulence of the lifestyle of these rich and powerful, while an entire nation, from the middle class, urban and rural poor, have been struggling just to survive. Many lost jobs, living in constant fear that tomorrow there would be nothing to feed the children.
நாங்கள் டிவியில் தான் பார்த்தோம், அங்கே போவே இல்லை அது ஆயிட்டான். என்ன செய்ய, ரொம்ப கஷ்டத்தில் இருக்கு. எங்களுக்கு கேஸும் இல்லை, பெரியவங்க எல்லாம் நல்லா சாப்பிட்றாங்க, களவெடுக்கிறாங்க, எல்லாம் செய்கிறாங்க. நம்ம ரொம்ப கஷ்டப்படுறோம்.
Amid a grave economic crisis, the Rajapaksas that was riding high on Sinhala popularity has today been shown the door by its own people who had voted them to power. In fact, 13th of July is going to be very crucial in the history, political history. And also what's important to note that the people that you see right behind me is the resistance of Sri Lanka, and they wait to watch out for on the 13th if Gotabaya Rajapaksa will resign or not. In Colombo, with camera person Kumar, Sreeja for NDTV.
In very important observations by the Supreme Court, they have said that we can't be a police state in a democracy. They asked the government to consider a bail act to streamline the release of the accused, saying in a democracy there can never be an impression that it is a police state, as both are conceptually opposite to each other. The court added that indiscriminate arrests create an impression of the police state and bail is the rule and jail is the exception, adding that arrest is a draconian measure which should be used sparingly. Presumption of innocence is a universal principle. Jails in India, the court added, are flooded with under-trial prisoners, with statistics indicating that more than 2/3 of current inmates in jails are under trials. This order of the Supreme Court cited also by the lawyer of fact-checker Zubair, as the Supreme Court gave him bail today in a case filed in Uttar Pradesh's Sitapur, but fresh cases have now been filed against him. Let's go across now to our monsoon tracker, which is looking at the unprecedented monsoon rain in some states, but also the deficit in others. So our monsoon surplus in 24 hours. Look at what's happening in Gujarat, where it's 566% more than normal. In Chota Udaipur, also in Gujarat, it's over nearly 3,000% above normal. In the Narmada area, it's over 1,153% above normal. That's in multiple states. So we're seeing Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, extremely heavy rain. But while there's excess rain in much of India, it's massively deficient in most of the Indo-Gangetic plain. So if you look, for instance, at northwest India, the monsoon is -8%, east and northeast India is -5%, central India 8%, but south India also there is a 29% surplus, and central India an 8% surplus. So the big worries are states like UP, Bihar, Bengal and Jharkhand. But let's just look now at the huge devastation and impact which is being felt because of the extremely heavy monsoon in many states.
Red alert warning for heavy rains across states. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Konkan and Goa will have no respite till Thursday. Usually such warnings last 2 to 3 days, but this time the monsoon mayhem has stretched over 10 days. The worst affected states are Maharashtra, where 84 people have died, and Gujarat, where 7 more deaths has taken the toll to 63. In Nashik, flash floods after heavy rains cut off several areas. NDRF and SDRF teams have been deployed in Gadchiroli, Palghar, Raigad, Ratnagiri, Nashik, Pune and Kolhapur. In Gujarat, 1100 millimeters of rain has been recorded within 3 days, with a whopping 566% surplus just in the last 24 hours.
Almost 1100 in last say 72 hours. So इसलिए फ्लड स्थिति बहुत ज़्यादा खराब है, ठीक है। और हाँ गुजरात, और हम लोग जो है वो जो सिस्टम जो सपोर्ट कर रहा है, जो अरेबियन सी से जो मॉइस्चर आ रहा है, जो विंड आ रहा है, वो ये इंडिकेट करता है कि ये जो एक्सट्रीमली हैवी रेनफॉल रेड कलर वार्निंग जो है हमारा 12-13 को गुजरात रीजन में है और कोंकण में बढ़ेगा।
The Central Water Commission has warned that even states not on the rain red alert could get flooded, with as many as 15 rivers having inflows far in excess.
Alarming news is, or rather news that we ought to take very seriously is that probably in the past 100 years, never have we seen this kind of discharge in Godavari so early in the year.
With Divya Wadhwa, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
But staying with cricket, and this is actually one of the most bizarre stories I've ever seen. This is about a fake IPL tournament to dupe Russian gamblers who are used to betting on the IPL, started by two, enterprising criminals in Gujarat. They started it 3 weeks after the IPL in a village in Gujarat. They hired local labourers to pretend to be cricketers. They set up their own YouTube channel, and they even had a cricket commentator who was a mimic of Harsha Bhogle.
The video is soundless. It is just the blue ticker you follow and the players in IPL jerseys. There's also an artist mimicking Harsha Bhogle. All this looks like a local T20 cricket match in India. Except this was part of what the police call a fake cricket tournament involving 21 unemployed men in Gujarat and a bunch of punters, curiously based in Russia. Harsha Bhogle tweeted, "Can't stop laughing. Must hear this commentator." The league was called Century Hitters T20 and the bets were taken on Telegram. The fraudsters were eventually arrested after receiving the first installment of 3 lakh rupees.
Well, if nothing else, you should applaud them for their ingenuity, but not for cheating these Russian gamblers. Absolutely amazing plan there. But let's just go to what's not a hoax. And this is absolutely amazing. Maha, these images we're seeing of our universe.
Absolutely. And if you ever wondered, Sonia, how a solar system came into being, we are now at the cusp of understanding that. And it's all thanks to this James Webb telescope, the space telescope, which is the strongest ever space observatory, and this has sent the first pictures now to us. This first picture is rather amazing because what we are seeing here is a cluster of galaxies. This is called SMACS 0723, and what it shows is not just itself over there, which is anyway 4.6 billion light years away, but you can see beyond this. And why can you see beyond this? Because this cluster of galaxies forms something which is called a gravitational lens, and that lens actually magnifies things behind it. So you are now able to get a sense of what lies even beyond this cluster of galaxies, and that is why it's so amazing. Now what we'll be able to see beyond this are galaxies far away, galaxies which in fact will show us what the origin of this universe is like. We are also expecting pictures to come in of Carina Nebula, of the Southern Ring Nebula. These are all going to show us exactly how the various galaxies converge with each other, how there are stars that are much bigger than even our own sun. That's what we are going to see in the Carina Nebula as well. Those images are still awaited, but this is the real exciting image that NASA released today. And you had US President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, all excited there putting this out. This web project is not by NASA alone. In fact, let's point out that the European Space Agency as well as the Canadian Space Agency are all involved in this. But this is giving us the sharpest images because this has a near infrared camera that is giving us the sharpest and the deepest images of the universe, Sonia.